Never quite know things.
All right, brother. We are ready, I guess.
Let's do it.
Our first podcast. The best title we could come up with was Beer and Blood.
It's oddly fitting, I think. I think it works.
Beer and Serial Killers. And I'm not much of a beer drinker. I'm not going to lie. The last beer I had was a Hefeweizen.
See? It
So
really works.
I'm going to let you explain what we're drinking.
So I figured if we're going to bust down the door, we might as well do it in a good way. We're going to try SLEIG'R from Ninkasi.
That is a very strong beer. That is a strong beer.
Well, we're going to break you in. It'll take some time, but we'll break you in. This is actually kind of low as far as acidity and I guess like overall punch. It's really not too bad.
Kind of looks like motor oil.
Yeah, a little bit. But it kind of has a good malty taste and a good sweet kind of finish. It's not as forward as some other ones that we'll probably get into later on. Figured because it is December that we'd stick with like a winter ale, keep it dark, keep it seasonal, keep it classy.
Yeah, I like it. Now, is this supposed to be served ice cold?
I believe so, but frozen glasses and room temperature beer, I guess we'll have to do for now.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it gets better or worse if it's room temperature.
You know what? I actually really like it either way. But I would tell you that cold is probably better, but I'm a personal fan of that. I got a lot of guys that believe that these kind of darker beers, I guess you would say, it's not necessarily a stout even. So as far as like a thick dark beer, we're not quite there yet. So I'm curious to see what you think about some of the other ones we kind of get into. But as far as this goes,
so explain to me the difference between stout and what is it, ale? Because you brewed your own beer at one time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I dabbled. We'll call it dabbling for now, I guess.
You made hooch, is what you're saying.
I made really fancy hooch.
Yeah.
I made like 6-week brutal hooch. That's exactly
the kind you sweat out and you just smell foul.
That's it. So we're gonna learn as we go type 2. I would like to give as much information as I can when I can, but I'm also, just a guy that really likes beer and really likes fucking true crime and serial killers and all that stuff. And as far as this goes, a stout is gonna be just overall a lot thicker. The fermentation process is very different from with a stout versus something, like this. This particular ale is an alt style is what they call it. It ferments colder, like a lager. So like a colder temperature usually will give you kind of like a more, I guess you could say a balanced, kind of more of a light beer. But the warmer that you are, that gives you more like a stout style, so a bigger, something that causes that yeast to kind of ferment maybe sometimes faster, even though they allow it to age for longer periods usually to bring up the alcohol by volume.
Yeah. Very dark beer. This is the darkest beer I've ever had. I'm not going to lie to you.
And it's really even not that dark, to be honest. There's some stuff that we'll get you into later on. Like there's an alt beer out of Oregon. It's a double black IPA called Dark Thoughts. It's from Bear Lick Brewery.
Oh.
Where we lived right across the street from Bear Lick, and that place was badass. Easily one of my top 3 favorite beers.
Now, are we worried about the head of the beer at all? Or
no, I mean,
because we really don't have one. It legitimately looks like motor oil.
It kind of flattens a little bit. It doesn't really have, like the classic head, but I would say usually with heavier beers, unless you're like a super Guinness fan, which is
a very dark beer.
Yeah, well,
it's not bad. I'm not going to lie.
The way that they do like their not necessarily their fermentation, I guess you could say, but the way that they do like kind of like a nitro almost. So it causes like that bubble rising and stuff, that famous thing that they have, and that's that's kind of like their go-to. But with beers like these, especially at room temperature, you're not going to have much to froth up. There's not a whole lot of carbonation in these to begin with, because a lot of times the real thick beers, if fermented without, they're not going to call it a gimmick. I don't want to piss anybody off, but if they do it a certain way, it doesn't really have that head that you're used to.
Now this is just seasonal, right?
It is.
Where is this brewed out of? You said
Eugene, Oregon.
Eugene, Oregon,
yeah.
All right.
Yep.
7.2% volume.
So that's not too bad.
Not at all.
No.
Bitterness, 60 BU. What does that mean?
So that's going to be like you said when you tasted it, and you're like, oh, like that's strong. 60 IBUs is kind of a mid-range, I guess you could say.
It's not real bitter. I mean, it's some bitter to it.
It's got a little bit of shock, but when you get into your IPAs and things like that, a lot of things that are like hop forward or multi-hop processed, with beers like that, you're gonna have a lot of hop forwardness or even a lot of really sustained hop flavor all the way through, and that's when your IBUs come up. Usually, the bitterness, the hoppiness is directly attributed to that. Not necessarily alcohol by volume, because as far as beers go, IPAs are pretty quick to make. And I think that's why they kind of became popular with the rise of home brewing, is because the turnaround time is easy. You put it in, you ride out your 6 weeks or whatever, and you go forward. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, you just try again. It isn't like barrel aging a stout for 6 months and then being really unsure, and then that laborious process brings you right back to where you were before.
Well, if you can get past the bitterness, it's a very smooth beer.
Mm-hmm.
Very smooth, very tasty, but that bitterness is, I think some people would be turned off almost immediately by, I'm not going to lie.
Well, if anybody gets past just that first statement that you had, they'll never know.
Yeah, they should really push through it. I'm pretty sure after 3 of these, we're going to be pretty well sauced.
There you go. You'll be ready. Yeah.
Well, let's dive into, we got into the beer, and our goal is to hopefully do one of these a week. And, well, let's be honest. We'll just call it church.
Let's do it
on Sundays.
Let's do it.
And we'll drink the beer, and we'll try a new beer every week. Some light, some dark. I guess we'll go with Colton and start with the dark, so I don't puss out and stop drinking beers.
We'll keep it interesting. If we keep it seasonal, I feel like it rotates enough that it's interesting every time you hear it.
Yeah, when I went looking for this beer today, the guy looked at me and goes, "Yeah, it's seasonal. It's out. Usually about by December 1." When I went down to Total Wine, they had probably 3 6-packs left.
Oh, yeah.
And no other ones. Oh, yeah. So I was real happy that I got it. But anyways, so we talk about the beer, but I know you're a huge fan of serial killers. Like every other demented person that I know wants to get into the mind of serial killers. And there's so many to choose from, it seems like nowadays.
Right? It's a plethora, so to speak. I will tell you, just for the full disclosure, I guess you could say, is that I too am kind of riding that wave as far as true crime goes. It's had a tremendous spike recently as far as popularity goes. A lot of people into true crime right now, which is nice because it pulls a lot of information back to light, and stuff that maybe wasn't solved, or stuff that maybe wasn't really looked into with tremendous detail is now being looked at a second time. And it gives you a lot of room for speculation, and I'm a huge fan of wild speculation.
Well, yeah. Well, and, when you got a pair of independent eyes coming in, I have a background, 20 years in law enforcement. I've worked homicides. I've worked major crimes, organized crimes. And I will tell you that sometimes you can get jaded over and over again, and you start seeing it. So when you get a fresh pair of eyes that doesn't see things, it's really good. But the pitfall of that is you get people that come in and think that they're like Dexter. The blood splatter to the left means he got shot to the right. And, there's a lot of schooling behind that. You can't just drink a beer and say you know how the guy was murdered.
The blood splatter is up and to the right. It looks like he might have had his dick in his hand when he got shot in the face.
Exactly.
Nobody fucking knows that.
Nobody knows. But it is good. I know that with the Netflix original, that Making a Murder, I know that blew up.
Yep.
One day we can talk about that. I can tell you he's guilty as fuck, contrary to what everybody else says. Just my opinion. But
how about the staircase where this owl fucking annihilated that woman down a whole flight of stairs and just left her bloody corpse at the bottom?
Yeah, it could happen.
Owls are fucking nuts.
They're nuts. And they will kill you.
I have not seen that.
Clearly enough.
And apparently I don't spend enough time poolside just like listening to whatever the fuck he was listening to when she got mauled to death by an owl.
An owl. Well,
and then crawled herself inside and died on the staircase.
Strange shit happens. I'm not going to lie to you. When you think it's one way and then you get to the bottom of it and it's completely different, it's a mind fuck. So it really, you never know.
But that's why this is a perfect segue too, is that little bit of skepticism, I think, is what keeps our particular conversations relatively interesting. Because if you're not saying it one way, then I might. We've had conversations before, about shit. I guess we've run the gamut. Richard Chase to fucking H.H. Holmes to Albert Fish, even. Yeah.
He's my hero. That's that's a serial killer that you want to look after is Albert Fish.
You know what? I really like that guy. He's not really afraid to push the boundaries, like using his scrotum as a pincushion.
Exactly.
He's the guy.
If he's gonna do it to someone else, why not do it to himself? You know,
the sack of potatoes over and everything. That guy is a fucking monster.
That should be one of our more recent ones that we talk about, even though it was early 1900s when that occurred. Another one we could touch on maybe. Even though she's not a serial killer, some people argue, is Lizzie Borden. That's another one that's always been an issue. But today we're going to talk about Anthony Sowell, right? Sowell.
I guess is his name. I'm trying to pronounce it myself.
And Netflix, I believe, has Netflix or Amazon has a documentary on him, and it's called Unseen. And I actually watched it last night with my wife. It was a great documentary. Highly recommend to watch it, preferably with a beer, apparently. So you can talk about it the next day.
That's the best way, man. You got to do that. And, you know, I guess I had a little bit of time to cram before we did this because I'm a procrastinator. And
well, you got a life. You got a wife.
This is very true.
You got a small child.
This is very true.
So, and you have a job.
Yeah, that's...
And you don't have the best days off. Let's not lie about it. Your days off are shit.
This is hindering. Quite hindering.
So with Anthony, what I've learned just by research and what I watched yesterday was, he murdered 11 females, all of which were I wouldn't say. Look, no one deserves to be murdered. I'm not gonna lie. But for some reason, some people will take the drug addicted and the prostitution.
The less dead, I've heard it called.
Right. and to his advantage, that's how he got to 11, was because nobody was looking for them.
Another guy, actually, he got a little bit of fame, actually, fairly recently, was Robert Pigton, Canadian, out of Vancouver. Mm-hmm. He was a huge fan of the less dead. He owned a pig farm. You never trust a guy with a pig farm.
Pigs eat
That's
everything.
what I've always heard.
They're like goat.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Actually, funny enough, I saw something come up today on the serial killer Reddit. I'm a follower. And a guy came on and said that when he was in school, he remembers seeing cop cars. Apparently, his school was across the street from Pigton's farm. Oh. And he remembers seeing cop cars show up.
Bunch of fucking cop cars.
Yeah, and just raid the place, I guess, looking for prostitute corpses or something.
You get nothing left. The pigs will eat it. I'm not going to lie.
Everything. So let me ask you this. So I'm kind of, like I said, I kind of got a little bit of the cliff notes here, but they said that they found 11 women in his duplex?
Well, it was in Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, kind of like Detroit or Baltimore, they have multi-level, multi-family homes. So you've got a basement, you've got an entry, then you've got a second level, and then you've got a third level.
Right.
And I've never been there, but if you can just imagine everything in a Christmas movie, it's those homes crammed wall to wall to each other, very small space, 3 stories high with a basement. He actually had, and I'm not gonna, don't quote me on it, but I believe he had 2 on the 3rd floor, which was his room.
Right.
And then he had 4, I believe, on the 2nd floor. And then he had the rest buried underneath the house in the basement.
Okay, so even though, like, let's say if he was it his, did he own the entire building? Like he had full run of all floors? Or was it divided in a way that he had, like, let's say, apartment B was the 2nd floor. Was that his apartment and he was just really fucking crafty hiding bodies in other people's apartments? Or like,
my understanding is it was his.
It was his building.
This was done in between the late 80s into the early 90s. They actually got wind of it. He actually got out for rape in, I believe, 2009, I think it was. And during that time frame is when he did the murders. And that time, you have to remember, if you're not, I know you're a millennial, like my son, but during that time frame of the 80s, you've got crack cocaine, and
just flowing.
That was absolutely the most vicious thing you could ever imagine. And during that time frame, you're hooked on crack, and there were crackheads. So the people that weren't around during that time frame, now you see meth. Right? But Crackheads in truest form is that from the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And he preyed on that. And in the movie, he actually talks about, one of the shopkeepers talks about how nice of a guy he was. Prior to that, him actually getting out was the rape and attempted murder of the victim that he ended up serving 15 years for.
Which is just crazy to me. I mean, you got to imagine, like, if that shop owner was, you know, I guess you could say smitten, like, with this guy. Like, he liked this guy. He carried himself nicely. He had a military background. He joined the Marine Corps when he was 18. And I guess he was a highly decorated person. He spent some time in Japan. He was overseas for a while and came back. And, people respected him. He had history behind him before, the hypothetical shit hit the fan.
And funny thing about that is his sister is telling the story in the Netflix original. She tells the story that he was off even when he was younger.
Yeah.
And he was paranoid, think his mom didn't love him, which I think if you look at some of the FBI profilers, they will lean towards that direction when it comes to serial killers.
So let me ask you this. I hate to cut you off, but I just had this fleeting thought. Do you think that maybe his, predilection for the less dead, you think that was kind of like a messiah complex almost in a sense? Like he felt like when he was a kid that he didn't quite fit and that, no one loved him and he didn't have his place. So he was going to, when he came back and he decided to do what, obviously what he was going to do, he made his mind up, but that he was going for people that maybe felt the same way. Maybe he was making that decision for them.
I don't know. I've sat across from murderers. I've interviewed murderers, and everybody has their own reason for murdering. Some people are a little bit more demented than others, and others are justifiable.
Right.
If someone looks and tries to touch your kid, a lot of people say, I'll kill him. So that would make you a murderer. But in this realm, in this scope, that's what he really got off on. And his sister talks about how, he was distant, how he said his mom didn't love him. And I think as time goes on and what we've researched in the past is that a lot of these serial killers have mom complexes or abandonment issues or control issues.
What is that, an Oedipus complex where you're kind of semi-obsessed with your mom?
Yeah.
Don't really, like you love her in a way that she doesn't quite love you back.
Yeah. It's not quite
your mom,
that healthy.
She's like, I don't fucking know what you're doing. Maybe something like that. As you well know, like you said, you're sitting across from murderers and talking to people like that and, and physically being in the room, I'm sure that you understand the motivation varies wildly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It could be something like maybe when he was 18 before he went in the military, or even when he got out of the military, whenever he decided to flip that switch, and go full tilt, so to speak, and hide 11 bodies in his duplex, which is still fucking crazy to me.
You have to be mad 11 times to kill people.
Yeah, I was gonna say no.
It's not just one time.
When you were like, "Oh, you touched my kid, I'm gonna kill you," and I was like, "Did he have 11 kids?" Like,
yeah,
all of
he got that pissed off. He killed 11 people.
Yeah,
I've actually sat across from someone who actually killed somebody over a honey bun.
Oh, damn.
When you think about we think what is a life value, and to this person, it was his honey bun. Yeah, it's a 29-cent commodity in prison. And they will kill you for it. It's what they have. And again, I think that goes back to what I was telling you about control issues. Yeah. Especially if you've been the person that's always had things taken from you your whole life. And then you have things taken from you in prison, or you have things taken from you in life. Yeah. Eventually you're going to snap. I'm not justifying their actions. But I will say that in this case, a lot of it was drug-induced. And I would say probably 100% was drug-induced, because when they actually interview him, and they have the tape, he's referring to these killings as dreams. Yeah. He's like, I just thought I dreamt this. And one of the witnesses that actually ultimately got him convicted saw a body without a head. And
so does he remember these things? Or does he see them as dreams? Like, is he like, in the passenger seat of a car at a drive-in movie theater, his car? You know what I mean? Like, somebody else is driving it. He's there, but he's seeing the entire thing play out in front of him. Was it like that, or was it like he didn't physically know?
No, he thought it was just a bad dream. And I think a lot of times people will tell you that, and it's actually part of an interview process as a detective. You try to get people to understand, hey, just tell me what you're feeling or tell me what you're seeing. And what it does is it lessens their culpability in the crime by saying, well, I thought I dreamt it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think all of us, if you've ever had a nightmare or you've maybe had a little too much drink, you tend to believe, did I really dance naked on the bar that night? You know, and you've got to call somebody because you're terrified that it might be reality,
right.
but you're passed out drunk.
But
in some cases, you are nude on that
bar. I guess that's true. You know, it just seems weird though that like it seems weird to be so disconnected from yourself. But if you think about it, you know, it's described when you get to the point where you are blackout drunk that you have the ability to remember. Your brain physically can create memories.
Oh, the body keeps score, definitely.
But it's turning it off.
Right. Well, so I don't think it's dissociation. I think...
You're conscious. Like, you kind of know what you're doing. You may not be in full control of your body, but you kind of know what you're doing. And what I kind of wanted to bring up and kind of compare to that is I remember, you know, being in high school or out of high school and smoking some weed, doing that whole thing.
I'm going to venture to say it was just weed because not too many people went off on crack cocaine.
Yeah, I'm not going to go on crack cocaine tangents, but... because you know, you take a drug like that's supposed to be like a, you know, hey, everybody hang out, let's relax and, you know, de-stress and do our thing. And I've seen people lose their fucking minds just smoking a little weed. It's fucking weird.
Paranoia. I will honestly tell you that I have never, in my 20 years in law enforcement, I've never physically gotten a fight with anyone on marijuana. Ever.
So my question for you, or what I kind of want to get around to, is that like every single person on this planet is completely fucking different, like everyone. So what may make you just a little bit angry, like your honey bun, you know, a guy walks up and he's like, oh shit, I got the last one. That dude is just a little too slow. But the other guy's like,
he didn't get too slow. He took your honey bun.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's the other guy in line. He's behind you, like that honey bun is literally the fucking frailness of my reality. And when you take that honey bun, it rips that shit right out. Yeah. And I'm ready to fucking murder you.
That's the straw that broke the camel's back. And
over a honey bun. It's kind of good to look at these things with like a sense of that reality. Like, you know, you sit across from somebody like Ed Kemper, who, you know, likes to talk a lot.
He's a narcissist. This guy,
and he is super narcissistic. But, you know, he talks about killing his mom and burying her head below his window in his room so that she's constantly looking up to him, like that kind of thing. Like, okay, dude, everyone already looks up to you. You're like 6'9". Like, you know what I mean? You know, like, what were you trying? Like, I get it, but like it, and he'll talk to you about it. And there's a whole, you know, you can read anything you want from Ed Kemper, and you might even be able to create some correspondence yourself and get him to write back to you, and he'll explain everything to you in great detail. The fact is that, like, what drove him to do that was completely different. And this guy served our country. He like went out and he served our country.
He might have been,
but he may, you know, on face value, that's what he did. But when he was there, that could have been when that broke. That could have been like that snapping thing. And when he came back, maybe it was like I'll finally fit in. I'll finally be here. Like maybe my mom will finally love me. There's that little bit of Oedipus complex, you know. Maybe she'll finally love me like I love her, which is a little weird. But he comes back and realizes that he can't fit into society, and he's looking at prostitutes that have a place, and he feels like he doesn't. So he's going to take control of his life, and he's going to take theirs from them.
Yeah, he didn't do any wartime.
Yeah.
So, you know, my guess is he probably came back and he got hooked on crack, just like everyone else did during that time frame, and crack drove to kill. You know, some people would argue that maybe he had some issues prior to going into the military, and the mental tests that we take to get into the military didn't catch it. But nonetheless, when you hindsight's 20/20. So when you talk to his family or you hear them talk, they're like, "Oh yeah, he was always just a little off." Yeah. You know, and what that means to people is, you always hear people say, "Well, I knew it would be him. If anyone would kill him, it'd be that guy." But we don't really put our finger on it, you know. And for him, I after watching that documentary and everything that I researched, I really believe that it was just drug-induced issues. There's a lot of things that go on with crack cocaine. There's a highly sexual side effects of crack cocaine. Then you take into consideration that if you're the dealer and you're looking for the buyers will do anything for that hit.
Oh yeah.
You know, so they're sucking that glass dick, and you've got what they want. You know, it's fair game. And almost every single one of those, and the two women that did escape, they said the same thing. It was, for him, he was trying to get to them. He raped them. And in one instance, he even said, say your prayers because I'm going to feed you and then I'm going to kill you. So I think in his mind, he was already past that. He'd crossed that threshold. Yeah. And a lot of times with people that kill for pleasure in that aspect, they like that adrenaline. They've reached the epitome or the top tier of adrenaline, and the end all be all is death. You take another person's life.
Right. No, absolutely. That's like the, for lack of a better term, the edging, essentially, of that, right? Like,
let's just hold this as long as we can.
Yeah. But that's the thing is like, you know, you test the waters until you get to the point where you're like, oh, I can't fucking, take this anymore. I'm so fucking hard right now or whatever. And then you bash somebody's fucking brains in. You can't go back from that. You can only go forward.
Well, that's the release.
That's it. Like, you can only go forward. That release has been had. You might get another one the next time, but after that, you're going to have to push it a little bit. It's got to be just a little bit different.
Well, it may be different in the killing aspect, but each individual person, like this guy didn't keep any keepsakes. No, he just kept the bodies. The bodies were there, but you have to remember, he's in a crack cocaine infested house. And if you've never been in a house like that, it's disgusting to begin with. They don't shit in the toilet. They shit in the bathtub. Or then they shit in a corner. So it's already, by design, it's already a nasty, filthy environment. To them, and in fact, what the storekeep actually said was him killing those crackheads was like taking out the garbage. And if the storekeep is looking at it like that, then how is he looking at it? This is just a usable piece of property that I can dispose of, and I can get 10 more. And that's exactly what he did. You know, he found one, got away with it. Nobody came looking. Nobody looked for that victim, and he got 10 more. In fact, during that time frame, he actually sexually assaulted a woman, and it wasn't until much later that they realized that that's what led him back to the bodies.
I was going to say, didn't there, out of the 11 that they found or something, there was like 2 or 3, I think, maybe 3 additional victims that he had, raped or attempted rape and let live, which is
weird because the one that actually testified against him, he actually walked her down the flight of stairs and opened the door and let her right out the door. And one crackhead to another, he's like, you're going to turn me in. She's like, no, it's just rough sex,
Yeah.
Got a little crazy because of crack cocaine.
We just smoked a little bit. And,
too much. Yeah. And he let her go, and that was ultimately his demise. And I think when you watch his trial on the Netflix film, he actually looks relieved. And it was weird because during that time frame, I think he was convicted in 2011, but he wasn't shackled. He wasn't cuffed to a belly chain. He was freely moving. But he actually puts his hands together and bows towards the judge, the people in the courtroom. Sure. Maybe it was his own demons, and he just didn't want to remember that because, like I said in the interview, he actually says this was all a dream. I dreamt this, and maybe it was in his mind just a really bad dream.
Yeah, like a fucked up light switch that he chose to get out of his own reality as if it couldn't be any worse. But then once he got there,
I think
felt like he was automated, like he didn't have the control, and then he realized it was much worse. But like anything, you start to do drugs, or you start to do something in just excess, just great excess, to the point where it is affecting your life. Again, much like edging, you can't go back from that. It's difficult. It's difficult for a lot of people to come back from that kind of stuff. You're always chasing the next thing. But taking another life, I don't know anybody that's set up that way. Yeah, as demented as it sounds, even some of the worst serial killers, you can see in their faces that at some point they're over the killing, and they're almost relieved that that it's done. So that leads me back to that point that I was making just a little bit earlier. So I wanted to kind of circle around and ask you about that. Do you think he was relieved to be in prison? Maybe because maybe in some weird thing, he was atoning for his sins and he felt that way. Or two, do you feel like maybe because he felt that he didn't have a place, that if he was put away, it wouldn't matter?
No, because in the documentary, they actually said, somebody that was celled with him said that he was going to do his 15 years his way. Again, it comes back to control.
Yeah.
He really wanted to control that. They wanted him to do certain things. He said no, he's going to do it his way. And I think as time goes on, the more we do of these, you're going to realize a lot of this has to do with control.
Right.
That's really the bottom line, I think, in my opinion, is that you're controlling another person's human being.
Well, shouldn't you be thinking about it? Talk about control. If he's trying to control his own destiny, maybe that is the next step. Maybe he's like, you know what, dude, I'm going to go right to prison. And when I get there, I'm going to control that shit. I got guards around me that are supposed to dictate my life, and I'm going to fucking control them.
And they do.
Like, he's like the ultimate controller. This was like his ultimate test to himself. Maybe that's how he felt. Maybe it was his, like, it's weird. It's weird on the type of crazy shit that people get their kicks on. I just completely. And like, you can't buy it. You can't say 100% that that's not the case, because it could be. It could be a little bit.
Well, even getting caught, going to prison is not, I think a lot of it is getting away with the crime. See, they're in control, right? And that's why we have some serial killers that will actually pick up the phone, call the police, and taunt them, because they're in control. And that ultimately is their demise.
So that brings us back to, BTK. Let's send a floppy disk out and get your shit nabbed. Or
yeah. The Unabomber did the same thing.
Unabomber did the same thing.
It's ultimately their demise. As much control as they want to have, that control, eventually they spew so much information that they get caught. They're not in control anymore. And in this case, he let them go. And there's really no rhyme or reason why he let them go. But I think that still goes back to his mental state of, I'm in control. Yeah. Basically, I'm God. Yeah. You are going to die, but you know what? I changed my mind, so let me walk you to the door.
Not only am I the master of my destiny, but I'm also the master of yours.
Right.
Even though that he, in some fucking weird, perverted way, or whatever you might call it, he took that choice from them in the first place.
Right. And
then pretended to give it back to them, which is super fucking weird. But if you think about it, I just, for whatever reason, I can't kick the idea that maybe he's more comfortable in a place where he has a little bit of less control, but acts like he does. And the reason I say that is, look at like Manson, which I'm going to say it right now, I have different views on Manson than like 95% of people. But that dude didn't want to leave prison. Like, Manson had a fucking rough childhood. And then when he went to prison, he didn't want to leave. He asked the guard if he could stay. Like, he asked them if he could stay. And
he has structure.
They're like, nah, dude, you're gonna get out of here. And he's like, nah, I just want to play guitar and like hang out. Like, I'm loved here. All he wanted to be was loved, because he was, raped as a child by other boys, and like weird shit went down. Like, it created a weird thing. And a lot of like his thing was I think he felt like when he had control of his life that he was fucking it up. So when he was in prison and he didn't have control of his life, it was his way of taking control of his life, if that makes sense. By having somebody else guide him, he was taking control and making his life better.
Well, yeah, because someone else has structured that layout for him.
Like rehab for your life.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and even then, I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's apples and oranges. You're talking about someone who has a traumatic childhood versus someone who didn't. You have a whole different kind of fucked up issues in that scope, especially not having that structure and only knowing the bad of humanity. You don't see a good of humanity in that.
But what if Anthony felt that? What if he felt that?
I think his perception.
You know what I mean? Like his perception, because everyone in the world is their own gentle little fucking snowflake. That he has to feel like he's been wronged some way. Maybe that's part of it. But I mean, at the end of the day, he's still a piece of shit who killed fucking 11 people and let 3 people go and pretended to play God essentially. So back to the victims. From what I understand, he kind of fit a bill. African American women for the most part was kind of his thing. Less dead, as you mentioned. We're talking, crackheads.
I think
some prostitutes, that kind of thing.
I don't know that his forte was African American women. I believe that was just the pull that was given to him in front of him. He's in the poverty-stricken area of Cincinnati during the crack times. And, when you are, I could almost tell you it would have been 11 white females if he would have been in that neighborhood at that time.
Right.
I think it was just the pickings that were there.
Right.
And it was so easy. Some of that didn't even get followed up by the police for weeks or months, and some didn't even get followed up until after they had to identify the bodies.
Right.
They were documented as missing. But you have to remember, too, as an adult, if you choose to just leave, you can't be missing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. Because if you're choosing it.
Yeah, as an adult, if you just leave and don't tell anybody, technically you're missing. But if you don't want to be found, even if, let me put it in the perspective of law enforcement. If you pick up tomorrow and go to Jamaica and don't tell anyone, and your wife calls the police and says, I want to make a missing persons report, they will put you in the system as missing. And when you get contacted by the police, they're going to say, hey, you're missing, contact home. And then they'll take you out of the system saying you're okay.
Right.
And they won't, we're not obligated to call your wife and say, he's fine. What we would do is we would call and say, he's okay, and that's all I can tell you.
To his family, he is missing, but perhaps he's found a life playing bongos on the beach.
Exactly. Drinking.
He's very much found. He's
drinking
found
motor
it.
oil.
Yeah, basically. He's found it. But it's interesting because as I read through here, it makes sense. These are kind of downtrodden, seemingly downtrodden people. As you say, almost kind of like the projects, almost kind of like in that same concept, like very, very low class, very, not very loosely monitored. Maybe the police don't even like to be in those neighborhoods.
Well,
Maybe
it wasn't always like
them.
that. I think Mount Pleasant is what it was called. And I believe in the early 50s into the 60s, it was a very high, thriving area of Cincinnati. It wasn't a bad area. But I think, again, just like any other major metropolis, you've got drugs that are ingested into a system, and you have jobs leaving that area, and then the downfall of a city. That's what's left. Yeah. And it wasn't always like that. It wasn't like he was brought up in the projects, or some people would argue and say, well, it's just trailer trash and trailer park stuff or ghetto stuff, but it wasn't like that. Mount Pleasant wasn't like that. Right. From what they explained there, it was a very booming Cincinnati suburb. And when crack hits, jobs leave, all these things that are socio-economic stuff comes out.
Crack is like the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. For neighborhoods, essentially, man.
As funny as it sounds.
When it fucking hits, there's nothing left standing. And it's the truth. It 100% is the truth. But I do want to ask you this. So, as you were in homicide, you've been around that. You were in neighborhoods that were, that were less, so to speak. And you've been around people that, obviously have addiction issues and things like that. Let me ask you this. His MO, whether it be African-American women or not, was strangulation, which is pretty intimate.
That's very intimate.
Think about it.
It's very intimate.
So let me ask you this. The less dead thing kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it almost doesn't, which brings us back maybe to the Oedipus complex, maybe something along those lines. And the reason I say that is it takes a lot to look someone in the eyes and watch their fucking soul leave their body. That's different. With the less dead, typically that's not an issue. You have your Robert Pickton types who take you out in the middle of nowhere and fucking rape you and then dump you to the fucking pigs because, that's just how it is. Or you have your Pee Wee Gaskins types that take you out and fucking, chain you down at the bottom of a swamp somewhere and just leave you there, or pick you up on a highway and take you out somewhere and bash your brains in, or whatever, whatever the case may be. They're not typically as intimate as physically looking you in the face and strangling you. I think that says a lot about where he was.
Well, and you have to remember there's a couple reasons why people strangle people. And one is it's less bloody. Two, there's a lot less physical evidence. right? So when you strangle somebody, and in one instance, he actually had a extension cord that he had used. So you don't necessarily have to look somebody in the eye. You can run up behind them. You can do a lot of things that you don't have to see that death happen. But it is a lot less evidentiary when it comes to the strangulation. If you're using a tool, Jean-Benet had a strangulation done to her. So all those things play a factor. And sometimes I think people think that through, even just in thinking, I don't know how many of us have thought, man, if I see that motherfucker, I'm going to strangle him. And you process that in your mind,
Right.
You're like, how
is
would
that the easiest way?
Yeah.
Would I get caught?
Yeah, because not too many people are like, let me get a revolver so it doesn't eject a casing. And then they get the casing. People are just like, I'll kill you. Yeah. And they use whatever it means are necessary. It's less bloody. It is far more intimate because you have to be close to the person. That person has to let you that close to begin with. But in this instance, you're dealing with the factors. And the totality of everything that's going on is you've got somebody who's already hooked on drugs is going to go into a vacant house anyways, who's not going to be scared of piles of shit and rat. All they want to do is get high.
They want to get their fix.
So it's an easy way to get somebody into you. It doesn't cost you anything to strangle somebody.
Yeah.
Right? As a doper, you don't have to go get a gun, because as a doper, if I'm using dope and you're using dope, if I have a gun, that's a lot of dope we can get. Right? So we're going to trade it first.
Hell yeah.
And then be like, well, I would have shot you, but I sold it for crack, and now I have to kill you.
But, I mean, there's also kind of a funny, to go back on that, here's my skeptic ways. These people could have been already unconscious or in, like, a drug-induced kind of, coma state. Like, they could have been in that way when he strangled them anyway. So it might not have even been personal. And like you said, cost-effective as fuck. Definitely part of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how are you going to hide 11 bodies, in your fucking duplex when you're trying to get away with it?
He did.
Too, and dig them in fucking shallow graves and just drop them there. Like, it seems weird to me that it would be like a spur of the moment, just a click of the fucking, or a spark of the lighter to a fucking crack pipe or whatever you want to say. Just like that quick instance. I feel like some part of his brain kind of always wanted to do it, or at some point it was premeditated. Because when you were on drugs, which, I mean, I personally have never done anything that hard, that hard.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that, like, when you were on drugs and you don't have the control of your body, are you going to come up with an elaborate plan that you actually get away with for years? Or is it going to be a spark of the moment, whatever gets you through whatever you're trying to do so you can go buy more crack type fucking scenario?
Well, one, it's not spur of the moment because there's 11 bodies. If it was one, then
it would be different.
It would be different. But I agree with you. This wasn't a planned out, orchestrated thing. And the only thing that's not orchestrated and planned out is that some of those bodies were left in just rooms out to be out there. I think what he was betting on, and in the woman that actually turned him in and convicted him, was she went to go piss and looked into the bedroom and saw the headless body. Now, if you've been around crackheads, that doesn't bother a crackhead, right? Because they're drugged out of their mind anyways.
Right.
So seeing a headless body isn't a big deal.
Oh shit, John lost his head. That's fucking crazy.
Right. But when you sober up, then it's a problem.
Fuck, John lost his head. That shit is crazy.
Exactly.
Totally,
and that's what happened.
Different.
And that's exactly what happened. She had already been sexually assaulted. She sobered up and she's like, fucking Joe lost his head over this motherfucker.
God damn.
That's not right.
That's fucking crazy.
So that is ultimately for him. I think he used drugs to get him to the point of being able to murder.
Right.
And then being able to follow through with that. And the fact that you have such a vague memory, even like I said, you don't have to do drugs to tell somebody, hey, remember that time you were drunk and you thought you fucking stood naked on the bar? That really happened. Well, on drugs, it's to that higher level of forgetting shit.
Right.
So for him, I think that was what gave him the nerve to be able to fulfill whatever issues he had.
So quick question though as well. So let me spin this neat little yarn for you. Let me see how you feel about this. So, a lot of people talk about how he was seen in the area. Therefore, he was a known crackhead, right? Because he was in the area around crackheads, he was a known crackhead. If you were at an event or at a party, let's say you're at a party and you get blackout drunk and take a shit on someone's bed, or you take a piss in someone's room, or you do whatever you fucking do that's crazy, you know. If you were super, super embarrassed by it or didn't quite know how to admit it, or if you wanted to leave a little bit of wiggle room for yourself to possibly get out of it, would you not use the excuse that you were drunk or maybe on drugs? And because you were in that area by proxy, maybe that's a good scapegoat, maybe just a little bit. Although, to backpedal on that, people did see this guy doing drugs. So
right.
we know he was
doing drugs.
But you think that maybe he used that situation like to his advantage. You know, like keep, for lack of a better term, like let's keep insanity on the table type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To where like maybe I don't have to take full credit for everything.
He did try to plead insanity.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that, you know, if you were the kind of person that drank and everyone knew that and everybody's like, well, Colton just drinks, right? As much as you drink and pass out, I can help you, but I'm not going to be okay with you shitting on my bed, right? Like,
I don't know, man. I saw your bed earlier. I think it could use a shit.
Yeah, it's not like
it could use a dump.
It's not like it was like, oh, it's okay because Colton gets that drunk and shits on every bed.
He shits on beds. That's just who he is.
That's what Colton does.
It's fine.
Now, to that argument, if everyone in the house is so drunk they shit on beds, then it's okay. But that's pretty much what you're telling me. But he's in a world where everyone shits on beds.
Right.
Right? So if you come, like if we fall, you know, if I don't care about my house or we just have this house and it's kind of like the Airbnb rentals that they destroy the rentals because they're throwing a party. One person shits on the bed. Everybody's like, hey, Colton shit on the bed. So Cisco's going to shit on the bed and so-and-so's going to shit on the bed. Nobody cares. It's in law enforcement, it's called broken windows effect.
Right.
And basically, if I break a window and it doesn't get fixed and another one gets broken, eventually all the fucking windows are going to be broken.
So, which funny that you say that, you bring that up like right as my brain kind of like follows you to it. It's kind of, if let's say like you see one crack whore go into this place or, you know, whatever, not to victim blame or be mean to these people for any reason at all. I'm just very vulgar, unfortunately. If you see, let's say you see somebody who is addicted to crack enter this house and not leave, right? One time, you let it slide. Oh, hey, man, I saw some lady that was really high on crack go into the house. Maybe she was buying more crack, whatever. But I never really saw her leave. Second time that happens, right? Oh, hey, man, I saw another crack lady go into that house, but I didn't really see her leave. And then the third time, everyone in the neighborhood's like, yeah, crack smokers go in that house and they don't come out.
Yeah, crack
we
kills.
don't go look in there because they don't come out. So we're just going to leave it alone for a little bit. And maybe his whole mastermind fucking thing that he thought he was really planning out, really getting away with, just was dumb luck because of the area.
It was.
Because of that situation or that syndrome.
That's exactly what it was. Nobody checked. Right. And I think it's fair to say, even though they were crackheads, you know, crackheads... You know,
I call them crack whores, and I'm sorry.
That's
they might be addicted to crack, but they might be very nice ladies.
Yeah, they're not whores.
They might really be sticking to their guns. You know what I mean?
But I will tell you that if somebody's from that neighborhood, they're from that neighborhood, right? So, you know, if you've always been in that neighborhood and it's cultural, just like most areas are, especially like the projects or even some of the older neighborhoods in California, generational families have lived there. So, hey, there's Colton. Hey, there's Colton's son. Hey, there's Colton's grandkid. Like, that is a standard.
Right.
So when you're working in a law enforcement capacity, when you're working the projects or a historically cultural neighborhood that you know there's generations of families, when someone says, Colton's gone, Colton shouldn't be gone. Right? And it doesn't matter if you're a crack whore or not. Colton's not here.
Yeah.
And he's always been here.
Yeah.
And I think... I clearly for transparency, that is a downfall of the law enforcement. They should have known, hey, Colton's not here.
Yeah.
Right? And Colton is always
Cindy
here.
usually smokes crack on the corner of 8th and Cleveland at 7:30 p.m.
Right.
every night, but she's not here today.
And it's not a big deal. We're not going to look for her.
We're not going to look for her.
The problem is that sometimes on rare occasions they will just vanish for a little while. Sometimes they're in a drug-induced stupor for 3 or 4 days, and they're in a vacant house and they're passed out. And sometimes they're in the hospital.
And talking about using that room for speculation, like that leaves the door wide open for someone in areas like this to get away with so long. And I think that's why people like Robert Pickton or Pee Wee Gaskins or people like, Anthony Sowell get away with these things because they're in just the right place. Literally they couldn't be a more perfect time. Like they're just the right place at the right time. Like, they can get away with these things because
because no one's going to check.
Yeah, some people come and go,
They're not going to check.
Oh, and it only furthers that thing because, let's say you do see Cynthia on the corner, every night at 7:30 smoking crack, and you don't see her for 3 days, but then you find her in a ditch. The next time that she doesn't show up for a couple of days, you're gonna be like, she's probably in a ditch somewhere, and you're just gonna let it go, and then maybe a year down the line, when after you've cased that corner or you've been driving through that neighborhood or you're on night watch in that area, whatever you're doing, and you're like, dude, I haven't seen Cynthia in a while. Where is she?
Well, it's funny you say that because last night, after we were finished, I talked to my wife and I said, I've heard some crazy shit from crackheads. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you, some crazy fucking shit. And I'm not gloating or I'm not boasting, but every time a crackhead said something to me, I followed up on it for that mere fact that they could be telling me the truth.
And their reality is so different. But a lot of people write that off.
Well, because sometimes they see that, right? And I never got anything like Anthony Sowell, where it was 11 bodies. But I will tell you that I had an informant one time. We were working an informant, and he's like, hey, man, this dude has got a human head inside his fucking den, in his back area, right?
So that's like some Dahmer level shit.
Right. And so, now, mind you, a lot of the guys on the squad were like, fuck that shit. It's fake or whatever. And because I was already set in my ways and, hey, you don't know what the hell these people are telling you.
Right.
And I'd rather go chase false leads and burn it than eat crow later and say, why didn't you listen to it? And sure as shit, we did a search warrant on the house, and there was a fucking human skull in the back.
I laugh because I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That shit is scary.
And
That's fucking scary.
Don't you know, we do the search warrant, everybody runs to that back shed because we want to know.
Right.
We find the skull, and everybody's like up at odds, and we're like, I don't think it's real. And I think it's real. So we end up getting somebody from U of A to go over it. And sure as fuck, it's a human head. And we're like, what the fuck, right? So we end up doing the do for like theft of antiquities.
Right.
But we didn't have, he wasn't tied to a murder or anything. But that was the one and only time that listening to somebody actually paid off. I think he probably just bought it on the streets, black market or something. But looking at Anthony Sowell, when somebody says, hey, there's a body in there with no head, they're like, whatever. There really is.
That's just Anthony. It's so weird.
Those crackheads are just crazy. They got a vivid imagination.
Yeah.
But there really is.
Can you believe one time that dude told me he had a bad dream where he strangled someone and buried him in a
cut
shallow grave?
And what's funny is we didn't talk about, but in one of the murders, Anthony Sowell actually cut the person up, put him in a suitcase.
Jesus fuck.
Can you imagine?
Well, that's not premeditated at all. I don't see that being...
Maybe you just accidentally killed him and then thought I'd hide him.
I'd accidentally chop that guy up and put him in a suitcase because suitcase is definitely easy to carry and dispose of. That's just my thought on that.
Yeah, well, I'm not a butcher, but I've seen butchering done, and it's hard to dismember cattle. So a person, I'm pretty sure, is about the same. It takes a lot of work.
It takes some effort.
You're not going to be high while you're doing it.
No.
You know what I mean? You got to be somewhat... about yourself when you're doing shit like that. Yeah. And then if you panic, you're like, what am I gonna do with them? I don't know. I'll put them in this fucking briefcase that I have right here. That's the part that
I've got people chunks. Where do I put them? In a briefcase.
Do I cut it in quarters? Do I cut at the ankle? These kind of things are the things that really, when you're talking to someone, they can give you good reason and good cause. But again, what some of the stuff that defines serial killers, like we have that the husband that just killed his wife and kids, does that justify, is he a serial killer?
Right.
And he thought it'd be a good idea just to throw him in a bucket of, a silo of fucking oil. But in Anthony Sowell's case, like I said, I really believe he used dope to build the cojones to actually
do it,
commit the murders.
So he edged.
I think he did.
Fucking nailed it, dude.
I think he did. I think he did. Yeah. I think he was so high, and he's like, "How much higher can I get?
Oh, I'm so hard right now. How much harder can I get before I fucking release this?"
Yeah.
Jeez, that's scary. I mean, it's scary. It's so fucking scary. But like, the good news is that this particular guy is caught. He got his.
Oh yeah, he's
got his.
He's done. I think they may have sentenced him to death, but I'm not sure. Huh. Does it say in your notes? He may have gotten. I think he got death. I can't remember. And I can't remember because of the oil we're drinking is basically.
Let me take a quick look and pretend that I'm definitely not holding an iPad in my lap while I go ahead through this. It's funny that you bring up, listening to crackheads and stuff, because I remember one of my old houses, there was a Circle K by my house, and there was this guy that used to hang out behind it and talk about how ants were climbing in his veins and stuff. And you would just see him. He would just be out there. He looked like he was dancing. He was just jiving. He was doing his thing. He was trying to escape ants in his veins.
Yeah.
But to us, he was getting down. He was just getting down.
Well, it's funny. Alcohol withdrawals will make you, is it only withdrawals that will kill you and make you hallucinate at the same time. And I was working in the jails one time, and a guy was sitting in the corner yelling in the corner, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm yelling at the people in the corner." And I'm like, "I don't see him." He's like, "That's because they're little." Now, in his mind, it was a reality.
Yeah.
But going back to the serial killers, I have a really hard time when somebody actually plans out and systematically goes out and murders people, selects them. I believe you're in your right mind when you do that. I don't think that
You talk about street smarts and stuff, or like just being intelligent. For instance, look at like Ed Kemper. I would put Ed Kemper in the well-spoken, articulate book smarts camp. As far as common sense
goes, like a Richard Ramirez.
Yeah, Richard Ramirez, a little bit psychopath. That guy's just a little bit different. But
I don't know. I think he was right on the level.
I think he was what he's doing. But think about Ed Kemper in the sense that, like, this guy, he's so articulate, obviously well read. He's done over fucking 300 books or some shit in prison, dictated by him, because he's a reader. He does that thing. He's super. He's intelligent in the book smart sense, but common sense would tell you when you get caught not to really talk about all of it right away. And he never shied away from that. He was all about it.
It's bravado.
It is.
I know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think he even
I'm gonna keep it from you. Like right now we have that case, and you're gonna have to remind me of this guy's name, but who's that guy that right now they just caught?
Oh, you talking about the guy that claimed 90?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember
90,
his name.
He's at 39 now. And this guy apparently, we'll have names for you hopefully next week, but this guy apparently has such a vivid imagination that he can draw pictures of what his victims look like.
I don't find that hard to believe. I think when you've taken somebody's life from them, it's ingrained in you. It's in your soul at that point.
To be.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that's how they're going to look at it, and they're like, "This is mine." And going back to the Ed Kemper thing, he specifically wanted those police officers to come talk to him because he knew what they didn't, which gave him the upper hand, which made him feel smart. And I think educating the cops is his ploy on being smarter than the cops. And to his,
he felt big because they were coming to him.
But yeah,
they weren't finding everything 100%. They were coming to him and asking questions, which means in his mind that he must have done something right because they couldn't figure it out by themselves.
And to his credit, he's actually helped the FBI learn to profile and what to look for. So, I'm not giving the guy kudos too much, but when someone doesn't have the answer to something and you do, that's probably the most powerful position you can be in.
Oh, 100%.
Right? If I need to have my car fixed and one idiot's going to charge me $5,000 and you're going to charge me $200, and a case of beer, you have the answer I want.
Knowledge is power.
Right. So
knowledge is power.
That's where you want to go.
Right.
But that's where you're, especially with serial killers, a lot of these people like to get away with it. Yeah. They like the idea that they've outsmarted everyone. Right. And then when they see that, I think human nature dictates and tells you that you get to a point of, I have to explode now. I have to explode because I have the answer. No one knows.
Yeah.
You know, and that ultimately is your downfall.
Or like even to the point where you're like, man, I've been getting away with it for so long. If I get caught and I have all the information, I can ride this out for that much longer in the event that I don't get in a car accident on my way to turn myself in.
Right.
Like that kind of shit.
They can plea it away.
Fucking nuts to me to think that, like, you know, at the end of the day, they might plan on getting caught. Why? So that they can still have a position of power.
Well, they have a huge position. Yeah, they have a huge position because a lot of times what they do is they're like, how many more? You're like, what's the deal in front of me?
Yeah, what are you going to give me?
Yeah.
I had 90 to start. Now I have 39 confirmed. Do you want to know how many more I can give you?
Right.
And cops are like, this kind of makes us hard too. Like, what do we do?
You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice.
There's a lot of hard dudes in this room. What do we do?
And part of the and with this guy that we're talking to, and you have to forgive us for getting his name, but I don't think it's about helping the cops at this point. I think he's trying to buy his way into heaven in his mind because he's confessing to murders that would be unsolved forever when he died.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that it's totally fucking crazy that, you know, these people get away with these things for so long. Like, honestly, especially when it comes to the position of dumb luck. Like, you know, we just ran the gamut on premeditated murders. Like, look at somebody like Ed Kemper. The dude is book smart. He knows what he's doing. To this day, I'm sure that he's got information that he still hasn't given that he's holding on to, like, in his back pocket, because he feels like at some time it'll benefit him. And that's just how it works. That's
how they think. Rich Ramirez did the same thing.
Yeah, and you know, it's just fucking crazy to me. But at the same time, you also have people, you know, like Anthony Sowell, who maybe his only plan was, if I keep doing this and tell him it's the drugs, I won't get caught.
Yeah.
If people keep coming into my house and then just disappearing and it becomes enough of a pattern that no one asks, I won't get caught. And I can get away with my weird, you know, fetish or whatever you want to call it, where I strangle crackheads in my house and then fuck the corpse or whatever he does, or cut him up and put him in, you know, suitcases or whatever. But the fact is, like, right place and right time will dictate a lot of what happens in these people's lives. And when it comes to serial killers and stuff, it's crazy to me to think that just because of our everyday activities, these people can get away with things, because you can't help but keep your head down or ignore patterns.
Well, sometimes
because they're there.
I think a lot of times when you talk to serial killers, when you see them and you hear them talk, they're surprised they got away with it. And they just keep doing it because they keep getting away with it. Right. You know, and that's part of it. I mean, that's the ultimate level of high. You take a life and you got away with it. You know, people like to get away with... No one really gets away with bank robberies.
Right.
But if you get away with it, why would you not do another one?
Say that to Wall Street.
Yeah. Those motherfuckers rob us every goddamn day.
Every fucking day. They're not robbing banks. They're taking their hands right in your pockets.
So
anyway.
We're coming up on the end, and I can tell you that the beer got much less bitter and a lot smoother.
Is that just because your mouth got a little more numb?
Yeah. I don't think my mouth can feel anything.
You're like, I can't feel anything right now. It's like...
But it is...
I think it's one of my favorites. I actually truly enjoy it. And I'm on, what, number 3?
That's right 3, now? Yeah.
And I kind of forgot I was drinking it.
So did I.
It becomes water.
It is very good. It started off a little bitter. You push through it, and it's very good.
It's very good. I think...
So let's kind of hash out what we're going to do next week for beer.
I think...
Do you have something in mind?
I think I have an idea. I think we're going to keep this trend going.
The holiday trend?
Just, you know what? A holiday trend. Just in... we'll honor our podcast cherry popper, Mr. Anthony Sowell himself, and follow a pattern. I'm gonna go ahead and say that next week we'll probably do Anchor's version of their winter ale, which is totally fucking awesome. They redesigned the logo. They've been doing it for like 45 years. The recipe changes every single year. And this year it is fantastic. And I'm actually pretty excited for you to try it.
I'm excited. I'm not going to lie. So we're going to put it on YouTube. Colton's going to do some fancy design on his fancy iPad.
Do some quick work. See what I can do.
And check us out. Subscribe. Because we want you to keep listening and send us topics on people that you want us to talk about or beers.
Absolutely.
As long now, do we have an outlet? Do we have like a zero tolerance of beer? Like we can't do like Olympia Gold.
I will straight
Bud
up tell
Light.
you this. I don't care. You can send me any beer you want. But if I have someone tell me to review Coors Light, I swear to God,
Coors
I'm gonna
Light?
come unglued. I'm gonna fucking come unglued so bad. I'll review 6 PBRs before I'll do a fucking Coors Light.
Well,
it's just
we
my
gotta
stance.
be fair.
We
gotta be fair. If you're a cowboy, you're drinking Coors Light.
I'll do it. I mean, I'll do it. At the end of the day, I'm gonna do it. But I'm just gonna be real fucking mad about it.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll eventually incorporate some cigars into that, and we'll make that happen.
So that being said, if I'm holding the beer part, what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about as far as our next topic goes in the serial killer mystery?
You know, I'm a little bit of the obscure kind of guy, and I'd like to find a female serial killer.
Ooh, like an Eileen Wuornos type.
Yeah, I'd like to find somebody. Because, look, you know, I worked at the time with Jodi Arias. It was in my city when it occurred. And although she's not a serial killer,
technically,
I will tell you that there's something. It's not that it's intriguing.
Have you seen her, though? I feel like she's killed some cereal in her time.
No, yeah, she's... But I will tell you that I don't think it's really fair to call them serial killers because, look, men are stupid.
They are.
And if a hot blonde tells you to get naked and turn your back to her...
I'm going to do it.
You see what I'm saying? It's not hard. It's like shooting fish in a barrel.
I'm married and I'm going to do it.
Exactly. And that's why I'm saying that I think we should pick someone for the next one, maybe female, because cherry picking is easy. There's so many serial killers. But let's try to shoot for a female who actually got in there.
Let's do it.
And did some dirt.
I like this.
Got her hands dirty.
Speaking of subscriptions and keeping the book wide open there, we're not isolated to just serial killers. I mean, we kind of are. That's kind of where we lie as far as our interest goes. But you know, we see a lot of people that tend to do solved mystery cases because there's a bookend. But we are open to doing some unsolved stuff as well. You know, there's some really interesting things that have gone on in our grand state of Arizona.
And there is some. I mean, we did have serial shooters, serial killers. We had the baseline killer, some of that stuff. A lot of that is public record, so we can get a lot of those case notes. And some of that stuff happened in the city that I worked in. So I am privy to some of that information.
And that's amazing. And that's the kind of stuff that we're hoping to bring everyone, and when we can. So yeah, just keep the book wide open. Keep the conversation flowing. If you guys have any kind of recommendations at all, definitely feel free to give them. We'll do everything we can to make sure that, you know, we try to touch as much as we can as far as subjects go. I think that's fair. Fair enough.
That's fair for me.
Hell yeah.
All right. Next week, right?
That's it.
Until we have church.
Beer.